Chapter 1. The Cruel Joke. I still remember the laughter. It wasn't the kind that warms your chest. It was sharp, like glass shattering in my ears. Ryan slapped the table, nearly spilling his drink. "Come on, man. Just do it. Marry her. It'll be the biggest joke of the century." Marcus leaned back in his chair, smirking. "She can't even talk. Imagine introducing her at family dinners. The silence will kill them." Their words echoed around the bar that night. I should have walked away, but I was drunk, angry, and too weak to say no. My pride mattered more than my sense, and that's how I ended up standing in a small hall the next morning, dressed in a suit that didn't feel like mine, watching a woman I barely knew walk toward me. She didn't look up. Her dark hair covered half her face, and her hands trembled as she clutched the bouquet. A mute waitress, Elena, they had said her name was. I'd seen her serving tables, her lips pressed shut, her eyes darting away whenever laughter filled the room. I clenched my fists. "This is insane," I muttered under my breath. Ryan nudged me from behind. "Don't chicken out now. Everyone's watching everyone." That's right. A few of my so-called friends had gathered just to see the spectacle. Their phones were ready, smirks painted across their faces. To them, my humiliation was entertainment. When the officiant asked me if I took her as my wife, I hesitated. For a heartbeat, I thought about refusing. But then I heard Marcus whisper, loud enough for me to catch, "Bet he won't even last a week." My pride screamed louder than my conscience. "I do," I said, the words sour on my tongue. Elena raised her head for the first time. Her eyes weren't blank or lifeless like I expected. They were soft, almost apologetic, but filled with something I couldn't name. She nodded silently, and the officiant pronounced us husband and wife. Applause followed, mixed with cruel laughter. The ride back was suffocating. Ryan leaned over from the back seat, grinning. "Man, you actually did it. Married a mute. You're a legend." I kept my eyes on the road. My jaw was tight, my knuckles white around the steering wheel. Elena sat beside me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't look at me, didn't make a sound. The silence pressed down heavier than their laughter. At a red light, I snapped. "Why did you even agree to this? Do you like being part of their joke?" She flinched, but didn't answer, of course. Instead, she stared out the window, her profile lit by the dying sun. I hated how fragile she looked, hated that I felt something stir in me. Ryan chuckled from the back. "She can't answer, genius." That's the beauty of it. I almost punched him. That night, after I dropped them off, I walked into the apartment with her trailing behind me. My mother was waiting in the living room, her face pale when she saw Elena. "Who is this?" she asked, eyes darting between us. "My wife," I forced out. Her mouth fell open. "Wife? Are you out of your mind? You didn't even tell me you were seeing someone." I laughed bitterly. "I wasn't." This was sudden. Elena bowed her head, gripping the strap of her small bag. She looked like she wanted to disappear. My mother sighed. "We'll talk tomorrow. For now, show her the guest room." I wanted to shout that it wasn't my fault, that I was pushed into this, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I led Elena down the hall, opened the door, and let her step inside without saying another word. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling while their laughter echoed in my mind. "You're a legend. Bet he won't even last a week." The humiliation boiled inside me, but beneath it, something else lingered. Those eyes of hers, apologetic, yet unyielding. Who was this woman they mocked me into marrying? And why did it feel like this cruel joke was only the beginning? Chapter 2. A wife I never chose. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with a pounding head and a heavier heart. My mother's voice pierced through the thin walls. "Get up, we need to talk," she called. I dragged myself to the living room. Elena was already there, sitting stiffly on the couch, her hands folded like she was in church. My mother stood with her arms crossed, her face a storm. "Explain," she demanded. I rubbed my temples. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" She shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "You don't accidentally marry someone, son." Elena lowered her gaze. I hated how small she looked, like she was apologizing for simply existing. My sister walked in next, holding a coffee cup, her eyebrows raised. "So it's true. You actually married a mute waitress? God, this is unbelievable." "Don't start," I snapped. She smirked. "Relax, I'm just saying. Our family gatherings are going to be real exciting now." Imagine her sitting there, staring at everyone while we do the talking. "Stop." I growled. Elena's fingers tightened around the hem of her dress. My mother noticed. Her expression softened, but only slightly. Does she have family? I glanced at Elena. She shook her head faintly. She can write, I said flatly. That's how she communicates. Lovely, my sister muttered under her breath. I needed air, so I stormed out. Elena followed me, her steps hesitant. On the porch, I turned to her. Why didn't you refuse? My voice cracked with frustration. You could have said no. You didn't have to go through with this joke. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small notebook, and scribbled something quickly. Then she handed it to me. They offered money for my brother's medicine. I had no choice. I froze. What? Her eyes met mine, and I saw the truth in them. Guilt stabbed at me, sharper than anything Ryan or Marcus had said. You let yourself be used for their entertainment? My fists trembled. And God, I was part of it. She took the notebook back, wrote again, and showed me. I don't blame you. I'm used to it. That broke something in me. Later that evening, Ryan dropped by, uninvited as always. He barged into the living room like it was his own house. Hey, newlyweds, he grinned. How's the silent treatment going? I clenched my jaw. Get out, Ryan, he chuckled. Relax, man. I just came to see if you survived your first night. Did she whisper sweet nothings in your ear? He made a mocking hand gesture of someone scribbling on paper. Elena sat still, but her face turned pale. Enough, I snapped, stepping between them. Don't talk to her like that. Ryan smirked. Oh, defending her now. Careful, bro, you might actually fall for her. I wanted to hit him, but Elena tugged gently at my sleeve. She shook her head, her eyes pleading. Ryan laughed. See? Even she doesn't want you to get into trouble. She's smarter than you think. I shoved him toward the door. Leave, he raised his hands. All right. But don't forget, this was all for fun. Don't take it too seriously. The door slammed behind him, but his words lingered like poison. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table, Elena placed a cup of tea in front of me. She wrote something on her notebook and slid it over. I don't want to be a burden. I can leave, if you want. I stared at the words. My throat tightened. You're not the burden, I muttered. They are. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened. For the first time, a faint smile ghosted across her lips. I didn't know why, but that smile felt like a lifeline. Lying in bed later, I stared at the ceiling again, my mind restless. A wife I never chose. A marriage born out of cruelty. A silence heavier than words. But something told me. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a war I hadn't realized I was about to fight. Chapter 3. The First Crack. I thought things couldn't get worse. I was wrong. A few days after the wedding, Ryan invited me to a so-called guys' night. I should have known better, but part of me wanted to act normal, to forget the weight pressing on me. So I went. The bar was noisy, crowded, filled with laughter. I sat down, already regretting it, when Marcus leaned in with that smirk of his. Man, you're the bravest fool I know, he said, raising his glass. Actually going through with it. Ryan barked a laugh. Bravest? More like dumbest. He married her for real. I thought he'd bail at the altar. Marcus shook his head. Nah, I knew his pride wouldn't let him back out. Always so desperate to prove himself. Their words stung more than the liquor burning down my throat. You made me a bet, I muttered, glaring at them. That's all this was to you? Ryan grinned. Exactly. Don't act like you didn't know. Come on. Man, it was hilarious. Everyone still talks about it. Marcus added, seriously though, how's it going? Silent dinners. Awkward nights. I bet it's torture. Something inside me snapped. She's not a joke. They froze for a second, then burst into laughter. Listen to him, Ryan said, clutching his stomach. Already defending her. Give it a month. He'll be writing poetry about her eyes. I slammed my glass on the table, the sound cutting through the noise. I said, she's not a joke. The laughter died. Marcus leaned forward, his smile fading into something sharper. Don't tell me you actually care. She's a mute waitress, man. Nothing more. I stood, my chair scraping back. Maybe she's worth more than either of you. They exchanged a look. Ryan's smirk returned. Careful, bro. If you start taking this seriously, you're the one who'll end up broken. I didn't answer. I walked out before I did something I'd regret. When I got home, Elena was sitting on the couch with a book in her lap. She looked up, her eyes searching my face. "Don't ask," I muttered, throwing my jacket aside. She tilted her head, waiting. I sighed and dropped onto the chair across from her. "They think you're nothing. They laugh at you. At us. At me." She blinked, then slowly reached for her notebook. Her pen moved across the page, and she handed it to me. "Why do you care what they think?" I stared at the words. "Because they were my friends." I trusted them. She took the notebook back, wrote again, and slid it over. "Friends don't humiliate you." Her handwriting was neat, steady, like her silence carried more strength than any voice could. I rubbed my face. "You're right. God, I hate that you're right." The next day, I overheard Marcus in the parking lot. He was bragging to another guy from our group, his voice loud and careless. "Best prank we ever pulled. He married her. Can you believe it? A mute waitress, like serving tables, wasn't low enough. Now she's his wife. Bet his family's choking on the shame I froze. Every muscle in my body screamed to march over there and punch him until he swallowed his words. Instead, I stood still, my chest heaving, my nails dug into my palms. That was the moment. The first crack. Whatever loyalty I'd once had to them shattered. That night, Elena caught me pacing. She wrote a question. "What happened?" I showed her the bruise on my palm where my nails had dug in. "They don't stop. They won't stop." She hesitated, then reached out. Her fingers brushed mine, hesitant, fragile, but real. I looked at her, startled. Her eyes said what her lips couldn't. I understand. For the first time, the silence didn't suffocate me. It steadied me, and somewhere deep inside, I knew. My so-called friends had declared war. Chapter 4. Her silent world. I couldn't sleep that night. The words I'd overheard. A mute waitress kept slicing through my mind. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't block out their laughter. Elena was sitting at the small kitchen table when I walked in. She had a candle burning, her notebook open, pen in hand. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes soft but questioning. "You should be asleep," I muttered, dropping into the chair across from her. She tapped the page, then slid the notebook toward me. I couldn't sleep either. I exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of my neck. Guess we make a good pair then. Neither of us sleeps, neither of us talks. For a moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the flicker of the candle. Then she picked up the pen again and started writing. Her hand moved slower this time, careful, deliberate. She pushed the notebook toward me. "Do you want to know why I never speak?" I froze. "You mean you can?" She shook her head, then wrote again. "I can, but it hurts." My throat was damaged when I was little. Every word feels like fire. People laughed when I tried, so I stopped. I stared at the words until they blurred. I imagined a little girl struggling to speak while others mocked her pain. I whispered, "That's why you never answer. That's why you let them." My throat tightened. "God, Elena." She took the notebook again, her pen trembling slightly. Silence became easier. People mocked me less when I stayed quiet. I learned to survive by disappearing. I clenched my fists. They made you believe that silence is survival. And I broke off, ashamed. "I helped them turn you into a joke." She looked at me for a long moment, then wrote again. "You didn't know. You were hurt too. That's why I don't hate you." Her words struck deeper than any accusation could. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy. "Don't hate me, huh? That's generous. I think I hate myself enough for the both of us." She hesitated, then wrote something else. This time, it was longer. She pushed the notebook to me with both hands, like it weighed something. "You don't see it yet, but you're stronger than them. You defended me when they mocked me. You walked out when they laughed. That matters. I've lived my whole life being someone else's entertainment. For the first time, I feel seen." I didn't know what to say. My throat burned, but not with words, just with the weight of what she'd written. I whispered, "Elena, why are you even here? Why didn't you run from all this?" She took the notebook again and wrote one final sentence. "Because sometimes, even in a cruel story, you hope for a different ending." The next morning, I found her in the garden behind my mother's house. She was kneeling in the dirt, planting small flowers she must have bought with her own money. Her hands were stained with soil, her hair falling into her face, but she looked peaceful. I walked up quietly. You didn't have to do that." She looked up, then smiled faintly. She wiped her hands on her dress and wrote something in the dirt with her finger. Home. The word hit me harder than I expected. I muttered, "Home, huh? In this place? With me?" She nodded. For the first time, I didn't see her as a stranger tied to me by a cruel bet. She wasn't the mute waitress my so-called friends mocked. She was Elena, someone who had endured more than I could imagine, someone whose silence carried truths louder than any words. And standing there, I realized something terrifying. I wanted to protect her. That night, when I lay in bed, her letter kept replaying in my mind. For the first time, I feel seen. I didn't know how or when, but a decision was forming inside me. If they wanted to laugh at me, fine, but they would never laugh at her again. Chapter 5. Breaking Point. When Ryan invited me and Elena to dinner, every instinct screamed, "Don't go." But my mother insisted it might help clear the air. "Maybe they'll finally accept her," she said. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe people could change. We arrived at the restaurant. Elena clutched her small notebook in her hands, her eyes darting nervously as we stepped into the private room. Ryan, Marcus, and a few others from our old circle were already seated, wine glasses in hand, smiles too wide to be genuine. "Here he is," Ryan stood, clapping me on the back. "And the bride herself. Welcome." Marcus's eyes scanned Elena like she was some strange exhibit. "Quiet as ever, huh? Don't worry, sweetheart. We don't bite." Elena lowered her gaze, her grip tightening on the notebook. I sat beside her, my jaw already clenched. "Cut the jokes." Ryan chuckled. "Relax, man. We're just making conversation." Or trying to. The table erupted in laughter. Dinner dragged on. Every time Elena lifted her fork, someone had a comment. "So, does she write grocery lists for pillow talk?" One of the guys sneered. "Bet arguments are easy. You always win." Another joked. Elena's face went pale. She scribbled something in her notebook, tore out the page, and slid it across the table to me. "Please, let's leave." I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to stand, to walk out, but Marcus leaned in, his voice dripping with malice. "Seriously though, bro? What's it like, being married to someone who can't even say your name?" The laughter that followed was the last straw. My chair screeched as I stood, slamming both hands on the table. "Enough!" The room went silent. "You think this is funny? Mocking her? Mocking me?" My voice shook with rage. "You're pathetic." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Hey, calm down. It's just jokes." "Jokes?" I cut him off. "You humiliated me. You humiliated her. And you expect me to sit here and laugh with you?" Marcus leaned back, smirking. "What's the big deal? She doesn't even understand half of it." That did it. I grabbed his collar and yanked him forward. "Say one more word about her, and I swear." Elena tugged at my arm, shaking her head desperately. Her eyes pleaded with me not to go further. I let Marcus go, shoving him back into his chair. "Dinner's over," I spat, taking Elena's hand. We walked out, the silence in the room louder than their laughter had ever been. Outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap. I realized my hands were still trembling. Elena pulled out her notebook and scribbled quickly. "Why defend me? You'll lose your friends." I looked at her, anger still burning in my chest. They were never my friends. Not if this is who they are. Her eyes widened slightly. For a moment, she just stared at me, then wrote again. "Thank you." I exhaled, the rage inside me softening just a little. "Don't thank me. I should have done it sooner. Back at home, my mother was waiting." "How was dinner?" she asked cautiously. I shook my head. "It's done. I'm done with them." She looked at Elena, then back at me. For the first time, I saw pride flicker in her eyes. "Good. About time you opened your eyes." Elena smiled faintly, clutching her notebook to her chest. That night, lying in bed, I realized something had changed. I wasn't ashamed of her anymore. I wasn't embarrassed by the silence, or the way she scribbled her words instead of speaking them. If anything, I was ashamed of myself for waiting this long to finally stand up. And as sleep finally pulled me under, one thought echoed in my mind. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. Chapter 6. Planning Revenge. I stopped answering Ryan's calls. I didn't post about my life. I pretended everything was fine in front of my mother, But the quiet in me had changed into something sharper. A plan. Revenge felt wrong and right at the same time. It was the only language they understood. Elena watched me differently now, not as a joke partner, but as an ally. She didn't need to speak. She'd learned to read me in ways words never could. One afternoon, she brought me a folded piece of paper. Her handwriting was small. "Tell me your plan." I almost laughed at how direct she could be. "First," I said aloud, because I wanted her to hear my voice even if she couldn't answer, "I need proof." I listed names, businesses, texts, videos, anything that showed they set this up. Elena pointed to the calendar, then wrote, "Ryan's office party." "Marcus's receipts." She tapped her lip and looked at me, meaning she knew places to find dirt. We started small. I revisited the bar the night of the bet, pretending to drink with strangers. Ryan's arrogance was predictable. He boasted loudly about the prank, and this time I recorded everything. My hands shook when I hid the recorder in my pocket. Hearing their voices later, the way they laughed like it was sport, made bile rise in my throat. Elena contacted a man she trusted, Mr. Hahn, her former boss at the diner. I met him in a gray kitchen where he fixed appliances for people. He was rough, the kind of man who never smiled twice, but his eyes held something steady. "You want to expose them?" he asked, wiping grease on his sleeve. "Yes," I said, "but I don't want blood. Just truth." He nodded. I saw how they treated her. They paid her once for silence, small money for big humiliation. I kept the receipts. "I can help." He dug a folded envelope from under a stack of newspapers. Inside were crumpled invoices and a note with dates, evidence that linked Ryan and Marcus to the scheme. Elena watched Mr. Hahn with gratitude in her eyes. She scribbled, "Thank you." He grunted and handed the papers to me. "You do this clean. Don't make it personal. They fall on their own when the truth comes out." I stored the invoices with the recordings in a folder of messages where Ryan had joked about the bet weeks earlier. Each piece fit together like a puzzle, ugly and precise. Night after night, I worked in silence, piecing it together, and Elena sat nearby, her pen moving, offering ideas or sketching plans. Sometimes she'd write a single word, patience, and I'd feel my anger shift into something colder and more effective. At work, I started planting seeds, little questions dropped in conversation so people who mattered would notice the pattern. I never accused, I suggested. A whispered reminder to a client about business ethics here, a casual mention of accountability there. Their arrogance made them open a door I'd barely nudged. Marcus made a mistake. He boasted in an email to a partner using a phrase that matched one of the recorded boasts. That email landed in my folder. My pulse stuttered when I read it. This was the link I needed. "You've changed," Elena wrote one night, pushing the notebook toward me. Her handwriting was softer than before. I looked up. "I had to." She tapped the page. "Don't forget why." I swallowed. "I won't. For you." The words tasted different when spoken aloud. Not about revenge anymore, but protection. The plan wasn't just to ruin them. It was to rebuild the life their cruelty had tried to break. Elena and I stood in the dim kitchen, map of proof spread across the table like a quiet war plan. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that their laughter would soon stop. And somewhere in the dark, a new me sharpened its edges. I was no longer the boy who swallowed humiliation. I was the man who would make sure their laughter returned to them. Their silence would scream. Chapter 7. The First Taste of Karma. I watched from the corner as the first crack opened. It was small, almost invisible, but I felt it like an ache. The recordings, the receipts, the emails, they were not just paper anymore. They were slow-acting truth. Ryan's fall wasn't dramatic. A client canceled after a quiet call with someone I'd tipped. Didn't celebrate. I sat with Elena and listened to the radio like people waiting for news. "Did you hear about Ryan's company?" my mother asked. "They lost the main supplier. Investors are pulling out." I kept my face calm. "That's business," I said. But some satisfaction crept in. Marcus stumbled next. A message thread leaked, a boast forwarded by someone tired of his cruelty. It landed with the receipts I'd sent. Marcus called, voice raw. "You can't do this," he spat. "We were friends." "We weren't friends when you laughed at her," I said. "Friends don't make people pain for sport." He begged and promised to fix things. I listened. Elena stood in the doorway, hands folded, face steady. Later she wrote, "You are stronger." A week later, Marcus came to the house. He looked older, apology on his face. It went wrong. People are angry. My partner saw the messages. He searched my face for mercy. I looked at Elena. The image of her trapped under their laughs pushed me away from old loyalties. "Why are you here?" I asked. "To beg," he admitted. Elena stepped forward and wrote, "Why ask from the one you hurt?" He stuttered. I told him I wouldn't make a spectacle. The proof would speak. If he wanted to rebuild, he had to do it himself. Word spread. A reporter emailed asking if I would comment on rumors of a staged bet. I declined. Silence was a shield. Ryan tried damage control, posts, staged photos, denials. But the recordings reached a client who mattered. Sponsors who once laughed with him turned away. He called, voice small. "Please," he pleaded, "tell them I'm sorry." Elena set 2 cups of tea and left them. She tapped her pen and wrote one word, "Remember." The notebook pointed me toward the reason I had started. People started whispering. At the market, a vendor looked away when I passed. At work, colleagues asked casual questions and then hurried off. It was subtle, an undercurrent, but it added up. Small doors closed for them. A contractor who had trusted Ryan sent a curt message. "We can't proceed." Marcus's brother called to distance himself. The people who had once laughed from a safe distance now dealt with awkward calls and canceled plans. I felt strange sympathy sometimes. These were not monsters, just men who had let cruelty become habit. Ryan phoned late one night. His voice was thin. "Please," he said, "I'll lose everything. I have a family." He sounded smaller than the man who tossed insults like confetti. I could have stung him with a harsh word, could have watched him drown. Instead, I listened. Elena watched too, her gaze steady. She wrote slowly, "Think of the why." Months passed. Little disasters became a pattern. Marcus's partner left. Ryan's supplier backed out. Their reputations frayed. People who'd cheered the joke lowered their eyes when they saw me. I didn't gloat, but sometimes I allowed a private smile. When a headline named one of them, Elena stood beside me. She didn't gloat. She planted seeds of kindness, letters to a charity, helping at the diner, bringing her brother to our dinners. Her silence was a protest. Respond with growth, not spite. One evening, Marcus came to our door and dropped to his knees. "Please," he sobbed, "I'll do anything." Elena wrote, "What will you give back?" His promises were messy. I felt not triumph, but a slow closing, a wound stitched. The first crack of karma had widened into a fault line. Truth pressed until their laughter stopped. In the silence after, I realized this fight mattered for more than revenge. It was about taking back dignity and the quiet mornings with Elena. The fault line held, and we began building on solid ground. Every day we built something honest and new. Chapter 8, Tables Turn. The day it all came crashing down wasn't loud. It was almost quiet, like a secret finally spoken aloud. I sat in the lawyer's office, papers spread across the table. Ryan's recorded boasts, Marcus's receipts, the email that tied it all together. Mr. Chen, the lawyer, adjusted his glasses. "You understand," he said. "Once this goes public, their reputations won't recover." "I understand." My voice didn't waver. Elena sat beside me, notebook in her lap. She scribbled something and slid it over. "Are you sure you want to be the one to end it?" I looked at her. "They ended themselves the moment they laughed." Mr. Chen cleared his throat. "We'll release it carefully. No sensationalism, just facts. Once it's out, the world will know." 2 days later, the story broke. "Local entrepreneurs staged cruel bet to mock Waitress." The headline read. Ryan's face plastered on the screen. Marcus's name dragged through the mud. The recordings played on air. Ryan's voice clear, laughing about me, about Elena. The receipts were shown, the money trail undeniable. My phone buzzed nonstop. Colleagues messaged. Old acquaintances asked if it was true. Strangers sent support for Elena. Ryan called me 23 times that day. I answered once. "Please," he begged, voice cracked. "You can't let them ruin me. I'll lose everything." "Say it was a misunderstanding." "No," I said simply. "You owe me," he shouted, his desperation turning ugly. "I owe you nothing." And I hung up. Marcus came in person. He stood on my porch, eyes bloodshot, suit wrinkled. "You did this," he hissed. "You destroyed me." I opened the door wider so he could see Elena standing behind me. She held her notebook, calm as ever. She wrote something quickly and lifted it. "You destroyed yourself." Marcus flinched like she'd struck him. For a moment, he looked at me with something like regret, but then he turned and stumbled away. The fallout spread fast. Businesses pulled out, contracts dissolved, Ryan was dropped by sponsors. Marcus's firm issued a statement, distancing themselves. The men who had once laughed like gods were now pariahs. Meanwhile, Elena and I walked through the market together. People whispered, but the tone was different now. A woman from the bakery pressed a bag of bread into Elena's hands. "Stay strong," she said softly. Elena smiled, small, shy, but real. That night, we sat in the garden. The flowers she planted weeks ago had begun to bloom. She handed me her notebook with a single line written, "Do you feel lighter?" I thought about it. Not lighter, just finished. She nodded slowly, then wrote again, "Revenge doesn't heal, but justice closes the wound." I leaned back, staring at the stars. "You're right. But still, it feels good to finally stop being their joke." Her eyes softened. She wrote one last time, "You were never the joke." They were. Days later, Ryan showed up outside my house. His arrogance was gone. He looked like a shadow of himself, hair unkempt, voice hoarse. "Please," he whispered, "I'll do anything. Just tell them it was all my fault, not Marcus's, or the other way around. I don't care. Save me." I looked at him for a long moment, then shook my head. "No one can save you from yourself, Ryan." Elena stepped beside me, her hand slipping into mine. She didn't need words. Her presence was enough. Ryan sank to his knees, sobbing, but I didn't bend. I closed the door on him, and for the first time I felt the tables truly turn. Inside, Elena wrote one final note for the night. They begged. "You didn't break. That is your victory." I read it, then folded the paper carefully and placed it in my pocket. She was right. It wasn't just revenge. It was transformation. The boy they mocked had died. The man they feared had been born. Chapter 9. Begging at my door. The knock came late at night, heavy, desperate. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, Ryan stood there, Marcus behind him. They looked nothing like the men who once laughed so easily. Their suits were gone, their shoulders slumped, their eyes hollow. "Please," Ryan started, his voice trembling. "Just listen." Elena appeared at my side, notebook in hand. She didn't write. She just stared at them, her silence sharper than any words. Marcus stepped forward. "We lost everything. Investors, clients, even friends. Everyone's turned their backs on us." "You mean," I said coldly, "they finally saw you for who you are?" Ryan clasped his hands like he was praying. "We were stupid. We thought it was harmless. Just a game. But it went too far. Please, help us. Tell people we've apologized." I laughed bitterly. Apologized? To who? To me? To her? I gestured toward Elena. "When did you ever apologize to her?" They both looked at her, shame flickering in their faces. Marcus swallowed hard. "We're sorry." Elena lifted her notebook and wrote slowly. She held it up for them to read. "Sorry doesn't erase." Cruelty, Ryan's knees buckled. He sank onto the porch, head in his hands. "I'll do anything. Just please don't let this be the end of me." Marcus added quickly, "We'll pay you. Anything you want. Just give us a chance to start over." I shook my head. "Money won't buy back what you stole." My mother came to the doorway, confusion in her eyes. "What's going on?" "Nothing," I said firmly. "They were just leaving." Ryan looked up at her, desperate. "Please, ma'am, tell your son to forgive us. We've lost everything." My mother's gaze hardened. "You should have thought of that before you mocked a woman for something she couldn't change." Marcus's face flushed. He muttered, "We didn't know it would go this far." I stepped closer, my voice low and sharp. "That's the problem. You never thought it would go far because you never thought. You thought pain was a toy. You thought humiliation was entertainment. And now you want me to save you?" Ryan reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Elena finally wrote again, her handwriting firm. "We don't owe you our mercy." The silence stretched. Their breathing was the only sound in the night. Finally, Marcus straightened. His voice cracked, but he tried to sound strong. "One day, you'll regret this. You'll wish you had forgiven us." I stared him down. "No. The only thing I regret is calling you my friend." Ryan broke into sobs, his body shaking. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder, but even he looked broken. They turned and walked down the path, shadows swallowed by the dark. I closed the door. Inside, I leaned against the wall, my chest heaving. Elena touched my arm, her eyes soft but steady. She wrote, "Are you okay?" I nodded slowly. I don't know. Part of me wanted to forgive them, to let it end. But then I remembered every laugh, every word. I remembered you standing there while they mocked you. She wrote quickly, then showed me. Forgiveness isn't weakness. But silence can be justice. I smiled faintly. You and your silence. It teaches me more than their noise ever did. As later, when I went to bed, I thought about the look in Ryan's eyes. The desperation, the fear. For years, I had been the one crawling, the one humiliated. Now the roles had reversed. But instead of triumph, I felt peace. They were no longer my burden. They were their own. And with Elena beside me, notebook resting on the nightstand, I realized something. Their begging was not my victory. My victory was the life we were building that they could never touch again. Chapter 10. My Silent Victory. The morning after Ryan and Marcus came begging at my door, the house felt different, lighter. For months, my life had been filled with their shadows. But now, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was freedom. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Elena walked in, notebook in hand, hair loose around her shoulders. She sat across from me and wrote slowly. "Do you regret it?" I read the words, then shook my head. "No. For once, I don't regret anything." She tilted her head, waiting for more. "I used to think I needed them," I said. "Their approval, their laughter, their friendship. But all they ever gave me was shame. And when I stood up to them, when I chose you over them, I finally chose myself." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. She scribbled again. "You chose us." I looked at her, at the quiet strength in her eyes, and nodded. "Yeah, us." Later, my sister stopped by. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "So it's true. They came crawling to you?" I smirked. "Begging." She raised her eyebrows. "And you didn't take them back?" "No." For once, she didn't tease. She let out a low whistle. "Never thought I'd say this, but I'm proud of you." Elena glanced at me, her eyes wide. She quickly wrote, "Your sister said that?" I laughed, showing her the note. "Yeah, I'm shocked too." My sister rolled her eyes, but smiled faintly. "Don't screw this up. She's better for you than all of us combined." And with that, she left. That evening, Elena and I sat in the small garden she had planted. The flowers had bloomed in full, a mix of colors against the fading sky. She rested her notebook on her lap and scribbled. I used to hate silence. It felt like prison. Now, with you, it feels like peace. I swallowed hard, reading her words. "Funny I used to drown in their noise. Now I'd take your silence over all the noise in the world." She blushed lightly, then wrote again, "Then let's make a life out of peace." I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. A week later, I heard that Ryan had filed for bankruptcy. Marcus had moved away, trying to escape the reputation that followed him. Their names no longer echoed with laughter. They were whispered in pity. People asked me if I felt victorious. I told them the truth. My victory isn't their downfall. It's her smile, Elena's silence, had taught me more than their cruelty ever could. That real strength wasn't in shouting the loudest. It was in standing firm, even when mocked. One night, as we sat by the window, I spoke quietly. "You know, the day we married, I thought it was the worst day of my life." A joke. A trap. Elena looked at me, waiting. "But now," I said, "I think it was the day my life began, because it gave me you." Her eyes shimmered. She picked up her notebook, but then paused. Instead, she leaned over and rested her hand on mine. No words, no ink, just silence. And in that silence, I heard everything. I don't know if Ryan or Marcus will ever recover. I don't care. Their story ended the night they stood at my door begging for mercy. Mine began with a woman who couldn't speak, but somehow said more than anyone I'd ever known. They mocked me once. They laughed. They thought they had written my ending. But they were wrong, because in the end, their cruelty gave me my greatest victory. Her, my silent victory.